London in the 1700s was a city of extremes, a metropolis surging past 500,000 residents, yet constantly reshaped by disorder, ambition, and the lingering scars of catastrophe. This was an age in which medieval streets still twisted beneath the rising silhouettes of a new imperial capital. Elegant squares emerged in the West End, while architects like Sir Christopher Wren forged a rebuilt London whose domes and spires would announce Britain's growing confidence on the world stage. Today, through advanced AI reconstruction, we can revisit these long-vanished streets with unprecedented clarity. By studying 18th-century engravings, maps, and travel accounts, we can recreate not just how London looked, but how it felt. The damp river breeze, the creak of timber storefronts, and the relentless tide of commerce pulsing through the Thames. From this extraordinary bird's-eye view, looking eastward from what would one day become Tower Bridge, we witness London at the height of its Georgian ascent, a port whose reach extended across oceans and into every corner of the British Empire. Looking up the Thames in the mid-18th century, the city reveals the powerful rhythm of an empire in motion. Street, Paul's Cathedral dominates the skyline, its great dome completed in 1710 after rising from the ashes of the Great Fire of 1666, a catastrophe that had erased the medieval core and forced London to reinvent itself. To the right stands the monument, a permanent reminder of both destruction and rebirth. Below, the river churns with traffic, merchant brigs, coastal schooners, ferries, and countless rowboats weaving between hulls heavy with wool, timber, spices, and colonial goods. This waterway was London's beating heart, a commercial artery connecting the city to Newfoundland, the Caribbean, Africa, and the markets of Europe. Old London Bridge still stretched across the river, crowded with houses and shops clinging to its spine, despite centuries of structural strain. From this vantage, the city appears suspended between eras half medieval, half Georgian, yet unmistakably evolving into the capital of a rising global superpower, defined by trade, ambition, and architectural audacity. This sweeping view from One Tree Hill in Greenwich Park captures London from a vantage point that would later become one of the most significant coordinates on Earth. In 1884, this hill was chosen as the location of the prime meridian, establishing the 0 point from which all longitude and global timekeeping would be measured. Yet long before that decision, Greenwich already symbolized Britain's maritime identity. Below lies the graceful Queen's House, and flanking it, the monumental colonnades of Greenwich Hospital, completed in 1751. Designed by Christopher Wren and Nicholas Hawksmoor, these Baroque masterpieces proclaimed Britain's supremacy at sea and served as a refuge for retired naval seamen, the living legacy of victories won across distant oceans. From this elevated hillside, visitors could survey the entire approach to the capital. Incoming merchant convoys, naval frigates, and coastal cargo ships threaded the Thames in an unending procession, carrying wealth that fueled London's explosive growth. In the foreground, fashionably dressed figures enjoy what artists called one of England's finest prospects, a panorama largely unchanged even after 3 centuries. Leicester Square, in the mid-18th century, stood at the crossroads of fashion, intellect, and rising urban prestige. Once open farmland, it had transformed into one of London's most desirable residential enclaves, anchored by the grand Leicester House built in 1635 for the Earl of Leicester. Later, it became home to members of the royal family, including Frederick, Prince of Wales, whose presence elevated the district's social gravity. But the square was more than aristocratic display. It became a magnet for artistic brilliance. William Hogarth lived and worked at number 31, identified by a sculpted bust of Van Dyck over his door, while across the square, Sir Joshua Reynolds established his influential portrait studio in 1760, capturing the likenesses of Britain's political and cultural elite. At the centre stood an equestrian statue of King George I, erected in 1753, symbolising monarchical order amid rapid social change. Yet even as the square flourished, its aristocratic era was already fading. Within decades, entertainment houses, pleasure gardens and theatres would redefine its identity, foreshadowing the commercial hub it would become. From Leicester Square, we move to the south bank of the Thames, where the Tower of London rises with imposing authority. Seen from the river, its original moat and main thoroughfare, the fortress reveals why it commanded fear and obedience for more than 700 years. Its massive stone walls projected royal power, while the White Tower, built by William the Conqueror around 1078 using cane stone imported from France, stood as the architectural core of Norman domination. By the 1700s, the tower had become a complex institution, part palace, part prison, part armory, part mint, and the secure treasury for the crown jewels. Prisoners arriving by barge entered through Traitor's Gate, the same passage that once carried Anne Boleyn and Sir Thomas More on their final journeys. Yet beyond its grim associations, the riverside scene reveals the Thames as London's lifeline. Royal barges, cargo vessels, and merchant ships gliding beneath the tower's watchful presence. This constant movement reflected a city utterly dependent on maritime trade, its fortunes tied to the ebb and flow of global commerce. The scene shifts to the bustling courtyard of the Royal Exchange, the commercial engine that powered London's ascent as a global financial hub. Founded by Sir Thomas Gresham in 1565 and modelled on the Antwerp Bourse, it had, by the 18th century, evolved into England's first true purpose-built trading centre. Twice a day, the ringing of the bell summoned merchants from every corner of Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. In this open-air courtyard, deals were struck in a cacophony of voices, contracts shouted across the crowd, quills scraping over parchment, and the rustle of bills of exchange passing from hand to hand. The arcaded galleries surrounding the courtyard housed shops selling luxury goods, atlases, globes, and fine books, while the early operations of Lloyd's of London began within these very walls, ensuring voyages that linked Britain to its growing empire. This single institution helped transform London from a prosperous port into the prototype of the modern financial centre, influencing stock exchanges from New York to Hong Kong. Here, commerce, risk, and ambition intertwined, defining the economic heartbeat of Georgian Britain. St. James's Square in the mid-18th century represented the pinnacle of aristocratic London, a meticulously cultivated enclave where power, wealth, and influence converged behind elegant facades. Developed in the 1660 seconds, the square drew Britain's highest-ranking nobles, dukes, earls, and even prime ministers, each competing for residences that reflected their status within the social hierarchy of Georgian England. What you see in this period is the result of royal gardener Charles Bridgeman's ambitious redesign in the 1720 seconds, a grand circular basin 150 feet wide, ringed by 8 stone obelisks, topped with lamps and enclosed by ornate ironwork. Before this transformation, residents had described the square as muddy and disorderly, hardly befitting its elite occupants. Bridgeman's intervention not only imposed symmetry and refinement, but symbolized the aristocracy's desire to shape the city in its own image. Yet even as the square flourished, change was inevitable. Over the coming decades, many of these stately homes would give way to clubs, institutions, and political societies, marking the shift from private grandeur to public influence. Cheapside, the commercial artery of Georgian London, thrived as a bustling centre where ambition and opportunity collided. Its name, derived from the Old English cheap meaning market, reflected centuries of economic activity long before the 18th century. By this era, Cheapside had become both a prestigious retail district and a symbolic stage for London's expanding merchant class. Above the crowded street rose the elegant steeple of Street Mary Le Beau, one of Christopher Wren's masterpieces rebuilt after the Great Fire. Its bow bells famously defined the identity of a true Cockney. Anyone born within their sound claimed that proud distinction. Along this wide avenue, shops sold silks, jewellery, books, spices, fine clothing, and imported goods that testified to London's global reach. These storefronts ranked among the most expensive retail spaces in the world, attracting merchants who built fortunes one transaction at a time. Cheapside functioned as both the Oxford Street and the Wall Street of its age, where everyday commerce met the early stirrings of global capitalism, and where London's growing middle class began shaping the economy and culture of an emerging superpower. History has preserved thousands of engravings, paintings, and maps, fragments of long-vanished cities frozen in time, waiting to be reawakened. Through modern AI reconstruction techniques, these static images evolve into living spaces once again, allowing us to step into the sounds, textures, and atmospheres of the 18th century with unprecedented fidelity. London, more than most cities, rewards this revival. Its transformation from a fire-scarred medieval town into the capital of a vast maritime empire is written into every quay, steeple, marketplace, and riverside street we've explored. These views reveal not just architecture, but a society in transition. Merchants carving fortunes from global trade routes, aristocrats shaping neighborhoods to reflect power and prestige, sailors and laborers driving the port that connected Britain to the world. Each scene reminds us that London's rise was neither sudden nor accidental. It was the product of relentless expansion, cultural exchange, and the ceaseless movement of people and goods along the Thames. Tell us in the comments which city you'd like to see revived next.